Thank you for joining our Twitter space, which we have very creatively named the RCDS Podcast. This is the second episode of the podcast, and we are discussing the main developments of the week in Nagorno-Karabakh in the Armenia-Azerbaijan context. So I'm joined now today by a very distinguished panel. My guests are well-known researchers and journalists, Dr. Artyom Donoyan, Simon Marakian, Bahruz Samadov, and Marut Vanyan from Stepanakert. The first topic I would like to discuss is not a very pleasant one. I know there is a blockade going on in Nagorno-Karabakh, and all the attention is on the blockade, and the humanitarian situation in NK is worsening. However, a shameful episode happened in Stepanakert last week. Haig Ghazarian, who is a journalist for CivilNet, a very good friend of mine and a friend of Marut as well, was attacked in Stepanakert by a group of people. He was beaten up and they tried to actually kidnap him. This happened after days of intimidation. Haig was covering a protest by lawyers in Stepanakert, and he was just filming their protest. Firstly, they took his camera, deleted the videos, and then he was invited to the National Security Service, and certain threats were directed in his direction. And after that, this incident happened. It is overall clear who is behind the attack. That's the Interior Minister of Nagorno-Karabakh. Haig recognized two of the people who tried to kidnap him and to actually beat him up. So this is an episode that needs to be talked about. Of course, we could pretend that nothing has happened, that, it's a very significant incident amid the ongoing blockade. However, one of the arguments we have been using while making a case for Nagorno-Karabakh to leave outside the Azerbaijani jurisdiction is the democratic argument, that we're a democratic society and we don't want to be part of a society that is ruled by an autocratic regime. I think this incident is also very harmful for the overall situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. This creates an atmosphere of injustice and doesn't help the situation overall there. And I would just urge, and have been urging through all my channels, the authorities in Nagorno-Karabakh to actually punish all the people who participated in this attack against Haig Ghazarian. Haig is probably, arguably, one of the best journalists covering the situation from the ground in Nagorno-Karabakh, and these kind of incidents shouldn't happen. If any of you have something to add, please, the floor is yours.
I don't know if anything needs to be added to what you have been saying. If I may jump in, this is Artyom. But yeah, episodes like this definitely do not do any favor to the people trapped inside Nagorno-Karabakh, and the authorities better get their acts together. This is a ridiculous episode, and in no society, let alone a society that aspires to be a democratic society, a country that aspires to democratic ideals, to encourage and implement something like this. It's ridiculous that a journalist who is trying to cover a judicial process Whether you agree it's biased or not is a different question altogether, but a journalist covering an important judicial process gets attacked and his equipment be taken away and so on and so forth. It also provides wins to the Azerbaijan's sails in this regard, saying that essentially what democracy are you even talking about when something like this happens? It is a shameful episode, and the authorities really need to address this in a very robust manner and punish everyone that's involved. Now, the episode arguably comes from the authorities themselves, so who's going to punish them? It's one of those conundrums and one of those peculiar moments.
If I may,
Well, I think, yeah, go on, Simon.
if I may add something, one positive thing about the reactions that I saw among my Facebook friends in Stepanakert and other parts of Karabakh, there was a lot of anger and frustration with the intimidation and harassment and violence against Hike. But it was interesting to see, people are in this blockade. They are, as Hike himself says, it's 5 past genocide. And yet people were really frustrated and expressed their frustration over that. I mean, that kind of gave me hope. I mean, they're facing, like a life or do or die moment in as a society, as a community, and yet they took on this important issue of making sure that journalists are not silent. So that to me was like showing like this society, they're going through starvation now, or starting a starvation, and yet they are in some ways fighting for their human dignity and human rights. So that kind of gave me hope. I don't know if Marut or others agree with that take, but I was glad to see some of those very strong reactions locally.
Yeah, and actually one of the positives is the reaction of the human rights defender. I think he has been issuing very solid statements regarding the case. However, there has been a lack of reaction from official structures, from all the political forces who aspire to come to power. Like lots of people, Hayek has given like a platform to lots of political forces, activists in Nagorno-Karabakh, and none of them has actually spoken up. I don't know whether the reason is that the situation is so dire that nobody cares about an episode like that, or there are some other episodes. But yeah, I think the general public in Stepanakert has been quite active at actually criticizing and condemning the governments, not the governments. I mean, the actions of a minister who decided that he has the liberty to act like that. But overall, of course, I think we need a stronger reaction because, especially in this situation of the blockade, when people are in the same boat, we cannot afford to have officials who think that they are above the law and they can do whatever they want. If other speakers have something to add, the floor is yours. If not, we could start discussing the second topic of our podcast today. Okay, I think this was important to discuss. I mean, the episode with Hayek, because the incident happened last week and we just couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. But of course, the main development in Nagorno-Karabakh during the week was the start of the protest, and that was taken over by the government itself. So this protest started as a small protest organized by a group of activists who have been rallying around the city and demanding from the government to take actions. They have been also presenting their views, their roadmaps to how resolve the current situation. And at some point, the government, and namely the state minister and his team, decided to join the protests, actually, and they became the leaders of this protest. So we had a big rally 2 days ago in Stepanakert, during which a lot of strong statements were made, mainly directed towards the Russian peacekeeping force in Nagorno-Karabakh, but also to all the international actors involved in the mediation process in the Armenian-Azerbaijani context. Then the protesters marched to the airport, which became the base of the Russian peacekeeping contingent in 2020, and staged the protest in front of the base. And then the leaders of the protest, the state minister, several other officials, met with the commander of the peacekeeping force, General Lentsov, and after that they presented the outcomes of the protest to the people. Yesterday, a new rally happened in Stepanakert. I think it was in the evening, and again the state minister was the leader of the protest. He was giving speeches, and he was trying to explain to the people what the government is trying to do. So I have two major takes on these events. First of all, I think this is an act of desperation. People are just too tired, and the situation on the ground is exacerbating, and everybody is looking for solutions. And it's very clear why people want actions. And these kind of actions are understandable. However, I cannot understand how these protests can affect Azerbaijan's decision making. I think we will have an opportunity to listen to Bahruz's take on that. I mean, the government in Azerbaijan is an autocratic government that is not very susceptible to such kind of mass mobilization. So probably the main outcome of this protest movement could be raising of the awareness about the situation. And the second problematic point for me is the participation of the government in all of this. I mean, it's understandable when people are expressing their anger, when people are trying to express their feelings, but the government has other things to do. I mean, the country is in a crisis situation, and for me, it's not very clear why would the head of the government spend a day participating in rallies. He could give a speech and continue working on solving all the daily problems. So I don't have a very black and white understanding of this situation. I don't think that this rally, this protest movement will necessarily help. But on the other hand, I of course understand the anger and the feelings of the people there. You should actually watch the footage and see, I mean, the pain in the eyes of the people standing there. That was the most striking impression I received from the protest movement while watching it from Stepanakert. Now I'm going to give the floor to all the other speakers. I think it would be better if Marut presents the situation from the ground. He was covering this rally and the protest movement, and we would be very pleased to hear from Marut what has been going on the ground. Marut, please give us your thoughts. Marut still experiencing technical problems. I think you need to switch the mic on if this is your first space. But we could continue talking, discussing the issue until Marut joins us. However, it seems he has connection problem. Okay, would anyone else want to chime in?
While we're waiting for Maro to sort out the problems, I was wondering if Maro's could talk a little about the coverage insofar it exists in the Azerbaijani media. I mean, I've monitored or I've gone through some of the Telegram channels connected to the Azerbaijani government or purported independent journalists or activists and so on and so forth. And there is much giddiness about what's happening there. And one of the most famous Telegram channels, Divicha Bashnia, Maiden Tower, is essentially gloating over the fact that now that the Azerbaijani government has the visuals of the people participating in the protests, they know how to essentially employ face recognition of the protest leaders and so on and so forth. And when the government has taken control of Nagorno-Karabakh, these are the first people to be either jailed or exterminated or what have you. Barus, do you have any comments on the Azerbaijani government coverage or Azerbaijani press coverage, whether connected to the government or independent or in exile?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me to this space, first of all. Regarding Artyom's question, I would say that there are multiple things there. So one thing is that these protests that they make for the propaganda media in Azerbaijan, these protests they present the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, as prisoners of the separatist regime, as they often say, as if they often present it, or to present there is as if the ordinary people they want to be part of Azerbaijan, but the separatist leaders they don't allow them to freely express their desire or their concerns. So this protest they clearly shows that these people they don't want to be a part of Azerbaijan. And for propaganda media, of course, it's a problem. So it creates a problem for them. This is one thing. It's for propaganda media. The second thing is that I observed that at least some opposition activists they posted and what they say is that look at these people they have a right to protest, but in Azerbaijan this is unimaginable that people in downtown Baku, for example, they gather and they protest. This is something which we cannot even imagine. Last time such protests they happened like 9 years ago. 10 years ago actually. So, of course, for opposition members, let's say at least this is a source of grievance, and they want to say that the lack of democracy in Azerbaijan, this is what makes these people also unwilling to join Azerbaijan, or but etc. Yeah, it's very simplistic, but this is how they present it. But I would say the main outcome is that this is a problem for propaganda media to present these people as prisoners of the regime and to present them as they don't have any agency there. Basically, this is what I want to say.
Thank you, Bahruz, for your very valuable input. I think this is a very important point that we need to take into account. Now, let's give an opportunity to Marut to present the situation from the ground. Marut?
Looking back since blockade started in Karabakh, I would say this is the most difficult days we are living in. Situation is really very, very serious, and the shops are completely empty and no electricity. People are market is empty. But it's not only about the food. People are asking the main questions: what's going to happen with us? And this is already second day we set up tents in Republic Square in Stepanakert and in also in Ivanyan Airport. People are staying there day and night, and it's I don't know. We are already hearing mortar explosion in Stepanakert. In evening on Friday, I heard these sounds from our balcony in the direct, the Shushihow close from Stepanakert, and imagine city full of children and the sounds and of course all this making people much more worry, and it's really very difficult situation.
Thank you, Marut. Simon, do you want to add something?
Not at this point. I mean, I would want to hear more from Marut about just what locals are saying, what solutions are discussed. Maybe some things that are we don't hear about on TV or in reports.
The other, if I could also pose another question, there has been some positive information about the meeting between the protest leaders, and the Lentsov, the Russian peacekeeper, the head of the Russian peacekeeping contingent. There has been some coverage, but it hasn't been extensive. So, could you tell us about some of the conversations, or perhaps even the rumors that are swirling? What has been discussed? What is the position of the peacekeepers, and are they going to do something about this? Also, can you talk about the possibility of the Russian peacekeepers themselves receiving foodstuff through Aghdam? Is this just a rumor? Because I was told that this is basically what Azerbaijan is working towards, and it looks like it may happen. There is some pushback from the Russians that they don't want to do it. They want to be staying connected to the Gyumri base of operations. Anything on this, Marut?
I think I could jump in on that one and then let Marut to answer the question. Yeah, as I understand, the Russians are really opposing this option. The Azerbaijani side has been pressing hard to change the route of communications between the peacekeeping contingent, trying to impose this new supply route they are trying to impose on Nagorno-Karabakh itself. So far, the Russians have been opposing it, and let's see what will happen. But at this point, I don't think that any drastic changes are to be made on this issue. Marut, please, could you?
Let's just go some 7 months ago and imagine how situation was here. Why to close the people's only road they have and offer them some backwittance, calling it humanitarian aid, when people can find it themselves? Where is the logic? I don't understand. Why I can't go simply to see doctor in Yerevan because of road is closed, and someone should bring for me food and call it humanitarian aid, and you eat this bakwit this week and wait until when we will bring next one. Why do so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't make sense. There was no humanitarian crisis. There was some crisis, but it was not very acute. So they created the crisis on the ground, and they're now addressing it as a humanitarian crisis.
I think we will have an opportunity to discuss this issue in the third block. I mean, when we will try to understand the different points of the Charles Michel statement, and namely the point about the Lachin corridor Marut, if you have anything else to add, please. If not, I think we could move on to the third part of our discussion. Okay.
I would like to add something.
Sure.
Yeah, regarding the media coverage, on Artem's question, I forgot about the so-called let's call them the Telegram media channels or Telegram media as a different sphere, and also Artem mentioned the Divicha Bashня and this Russian language channels, especially the most, I would say, the most extreme voice, let's say, in Azerbaijani society, it comes from these Russian-speaking Telegram channels. They openly advocate for the so-called counter-terrorist operation in Nagorno-Karabakh. So if we compare it to official media or like let's say website media or even like opposition discourse, doesn't matter. If you compare it, these Telegram channels, they represent the most extreme views on how to, let's say, like solve this issue. So they advocate for counter-terrorist operation, and they quote, for example, today's or like these rallies, and they say that yes, you see, these people, they don't deserve any help, they don't deserve any medicaments or food. So the only way is to conduct a counter-terrorist operation and to kill them, and they openly advocate for physical violence.
Yeah, and some of them are obviously affiliated with the state structures, right? Like Caliber and outlets like that, who also
yes, exactly, for sure. But at the same time, it's not official. So in comparison to official media or website media, we see the difference that in official media, they try to be more to at least to present a little bit like softer view, I would say, while in Telegram media, it's the most extreme and the most horrifying.
Yeah. Especially Sadat Guliyev of Divicha Bashnya, some of his writings just vile.
Yeah, I think this Telegram culture has come to the region from Russia. We see what's going on in Russia with all these Telegram channels. I think they have become real actors who are dealt with by the officials, and we're seeing something like that happening in Azerbaijan and in lesser extent in Armenia as well. I think we should move on to the third and probably not the most important topic in general, but from the international perspective, this is probably the most important topic, the meeting in Brussels between Pashinyan and Aliyev, mediated by Charles Michel. So as you know, the meeting lasted 4 hours, and a statement was released afterwards, Charles Michel's statements, who summed up the outcomes of the negotiations. I think several conclusions can be drawn based on the information we have, and mainly based on the Charles Michel statement. I think the first conclusion is that no significant progress was achieved in the main areas where disagreements exist between the sides, namely the issue of security and rights for Nagorno-Karabakh and the creation of this international mechanism of talks between Baku and Stepanakert. It was clearly written in the statement that there was no progress, obvious progress. If you follow the process, you understand the language, that there was no progress in the issue of delimitation. And here the main problem is which map should be at the basis of the delimitation process. In the statement, it's clearly said that there is no agreement on that. Of course, the issue or the track where the most tangible outcomes are already visible is the track of the opening of regional communications. But here as well, we haven't seen anything new. All the things that were mentioned had been achieved during previous months. These principles that the railroad should operate based on the principles of sovereignty, reciprocity, etc. So nothing new here as well. On humanitarian issues, and for example, the issues of prisoners of war or detainees, as they call it, because it's too sensitive to call the prisoners of war prisoners of war. Here as well, no significant progress. If we read the previous statement, there they at least agreed to release some of the detainees or POWs. However, that didn't happen, and this time they didn't even. It seems they didn't even try to agree on something. But the most problematic point, of course, is this point or paragraph related to the opening of the Lachin corridor. I cannot understand how the president of the European Council could include this Azerbaijani narrative about providing humanitarian assistance to Nagorno-Karabakh in the statement and put it in the same statement with the unblocking of the Lachin corridor. This is truly shameful, and I don't understand what the Armenian government is doing during these negotiations if this kind of wording is included in this kind of statement. And there hasn't been any kind of reaction afterwards from the Armenian government as well. So you need to understand that one of the goals of this blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh was to impose or force this integration agenda on the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, and providing or reopening these supply routes or communications or infrastructure from Agdam to Nagorno-Karabakh is part of this bigger, greater integration agenda. And honestly, this statement means that Charles Michel and in some extent Nikol Pashinyan as well legitimize this narrative, because if you include this narrative in the statement and you put it in the same sentence with the sentence about the opening of the Lachin corridor, you nullify all the previous assessments of the international community, the decisions of the international court, and stuff like that. Now, Azerbaijan has just another excuse not to make any concessions in the issue of the Lachin corridor. Overall, the text is mainly the wording in the text is mainly corresponds to the understanding of the Azerbaijani side. So here, this is just a failure of the Armenian diplomacy. That's probably too harsh to say, but that's what we have. And I would like to listen from you as well. What do you think about the statement?
I mean, it's hard to disagree with everything you said. Like I said yesterday, even when the EU doesn't want to put its fingers on the scales, on the weights, or doesn't want to appear to put its fingers on the scales or the weights, it is in fact putting its fingers on the scales on Azerbaijan's side. There is no. The EU was supposed to be this neutral, objective counterweight to both sides, but as we see, the pressure is basically on one side, and it keeps on piling up on this pressure. And Nikol Pashinyan, the only thing I can talk about Nikol Pashinyan acting in this situation is like in a boxing match, the coach switches sides in the 11th round and starts coaching the opposition. In a sense, that's what's happening with Nikol Pashinyan's experiment with diplomacy. The not doing any public pronouncements opposing to Michel's formulations, or at least offering some counter arguments, like we don't like this, we're opposing this. No, when the text comes out, it means that he has underwritten and he has given his, go ahead with the text. Michel wouldn't come out and say something like what he said had there been any meaningful pushback, but the result is as visible as daytime, and we can see that whatever pushback there was, insofar as it existed, didn't work, and Michel has thrown his lot and his weight and his uh, position with as aligned with Azerbaijan on this issue. Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that. Sorry, I will just make a short comment and give the floor to you, Simon. I do not necessarily think that Michel is biased or the EU is biased, but when you have a situation when one side is ready to make concessions and that facilitates the solution of the problem, then this is a very logical position to have. And I would like to also emphasize that this is not the only problematic part in this statement. I mean, the statement about all these supply routes from Ardahan. If you look at the part about the rights and security in Nagorno-Karabakh and compare the same section with the previous trilateral statement made after the trilateral meeting, you could see that this is so much more weaker. I mean, in the previous statement, there was talk about international involvement, that Azerbaijan should provide the rights and securities in close cooperation with the international community. In the previous statement, he was talking about a transparent and constructive dialogue between Baku and the Armenian population of Karabakh, as he says, and that's another issue, how he tries to avoid using the word Nagorno-Karabakh. Here, it's just nothing is said about international involvement. And regarding the dialogue, he just says direct dialogue, which is the Azerbaijani position, and it doesn't contradict to the Azerbaijani position. You could have a direct dialogue, and even within the integration agenda of Azerbaijan. So this was a very weak statement, and as I've already said, this is the outcome of the incompetence of the Armenian diplomacy. Simon, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, if I may add, and if I may, can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, Simon. What I was trying to say is that the bias of Charles Michel or the EU doesn't have to be overt or covert. All it has to do be in effect, and this is what we're saying. That's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm trying to say. And I'm not saying that he has completely bought into Aliyev or he's in Aliyev's pocket. Far from it. All I'm just trying to say is that when you have such an institution as powerful as the EU, or as powerless as the EU, but he nevertheless represents an organization that claims to have some power and claims to have some refereeing wherewithals and claims to lead a just organization on just principles. When when a representative or the head of such an organization comes out and puts out such milquetoast statements, the effects are evidence of bias rather than not an evidence of it. So, yeah.
I wanted to maybe zoom out. Let's imagine we had someone not familiar with this conflict listening in, right? And if they looked at the text by Charles Michel, they don't have background in this conflict and they don't understand the multi-directional sort of victimizations that have happened throughout it and the insecurities, etc. People might say, well, it's not that bad, right? So, there are practical solutions offered here. Why does it matter where you get your food from as long as you're not starving? So I think Azerbaijan has brilliantly managed to set narratives that may sound like practical solutions, which we know they're not, right? And then the EU is basically normalizing those narratives. But if people are familiar with this conflict, they realize the psychological, logistical, and all the problems. So I was actually going to ask both Baruz and Marut, so when you hear this practical sounding, right, Azerbaijani narratives that are being normalized in this text, what it really mean? what is it really that Azerbaijan is saying that we can give supplies to Rotterdam? Like Barus, like what is the message to the Azerbaijani society? And Marut, what is the perception in Stepanakert of this?
From Marut, if you want, you can go first. Okay, I will be first. Basically, what this message says that there is no blockage. Basically, the message of what Azerbaijan spreads is that there is no blockage, or yes, there are some problems there, but it's not like people are not starving there. So this narrative is the main. This is the major narrative, master narratives that they spread on through media, and it seems that in European Union, at least some politicians, I don't think they believe, but they just consume this for their own interests. And of course, this idea of let's open the so-called Ardam Khankendi road and then things will be solved. So this idea, they want to say that actually there's like practical things that we can do and we can solve this issue. It's not a big problem, and it seems that Charles Michel also agrees with this idea, with this option. And but this is obvious that it is possible. Yes, from one side we can say that if Nagorno-Karabakh administration, they will give up and they will say that yes, we don't exist as a government, or we don't exist as an entity. We submit to Azerbaijani law, Azerbaijani president. Then maybe this will, or there will be some dialogue and some premises, and then it will happen. Yes, this scenario, it might be possible, but the main outcome of this scenario, it will be the beginning of submission of Nagorno-Karabakh, and I don't think that it will lead to any outcomes in terms of Nagorno-Karabakh's autonomy or anything. But this will mean just that Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians, they will be dependent on Azerbaijan in terms of material needs.
Well, I think. Okay, go on, Marut.
No, it was me. It was Artyom. It was just adding to what Boris was saying. That basically this is meant to restructure the entire arrangement between the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh and the Armenian mainland, and the only purpose it serves is to essentially switch the routes of supply and make the situation even more acute and force the integration. Those that want to stay will stay, and those that don't will need to get out. It's fairly straightforward, fairly transparent, and uncomplicated, I think.
Yes, as I've already said, this is part of a political agenda, this integration agenda. So there is no practical use of launching these roads or infrastructures. This agenda, this narrative only serves political goals, and it is really odd that international mediators do not understand it. And also from the ethical point of view, like, is it normal from the international standpoint to legitimize the blackmail? Like Artyom, you tweeted a very good allegory today about hostages and hostage takers force feeding the hostages. Is this okay? Like we have created a humanitarian catastrophe on the ground, and now we are so benevolent, we're willing to give you some food and give you some supplies. How can this be legitimized? And from the political point of view, if we look at the situation from Nagorno-Karabakh, of course, the situation might become very dire, but the people there are not willing to accept this sort of so-called humanitarian help, again, so-called help coming from Azerbaijan. There are concrete agreements in place. The ceasefire statement clearly says that there is this Lachin corridor that should be under the control of the Russian peacekeeping force. The international court has recognized it and legitimized it as an international document. So these actions are absolutely unacceptable. And when actors like the EU participate in the legitimization process of such kind of actions, then it is already problematic. If you don't have anything else to add, I think we could give an opportunity to our listeners to join us and ask questions or make their remarks. Please, anybody willing to participate in the debate, but I think we need to have some sort of rules. Only people with names and people we know that are no fake accounts are allowed to ask these questions or make their comments.
While the listeners are formulating the comments and the questions in their brilliant minds, I have a question of my own. I was wondering about the arrest of Vitaly Balasanyan and what's going on there and what's happening, what's going to happen. I don't have enough information to make informed comment on that, but maybe Simon, maybe Tigran or Marut even can have something that would offer some clarification on that, because I think it is an important happening, an important event as well.
I don't think this is a political event. So there was a criminal case against his son, and the police went to his place to actually search the place, but they didn't have a search warrant. So Balasanyan opposed, probably some sort of quarrel happened, and he resisted the police, and he was detained for a couple of hours. Now, as I understand, all of them are released. Probably some of them will be arrested. I don't know, but this is mainly some sort of tiny episode that has nothing to do with the actual political developments on the ground. You should understand that at this point, Balasanyan is not a political unit in Nagorno-Karabakh.
Yeah.
He used to have clout right after the war, and you remember how the Yerevan press was saying that he's the de facto leader in Nagorno-Karabakh. Of course, clueless as always. But now, after he was dismissed, he's just not part of any political movement. He doesn't have a parliamentary faction. He used to have a parliamentary faction, but they, I think, swapped sides. Now they support Ruben Vartanyan. So I don't think that there is any political motive behind these actions.
Okay, thank you, Tigran, for clarifying.
Any questions, comments, remarks from the audience?
It looks like Murat has joined us. Murat, would you like to pose your question?
Murat?
Hello, I would like to ask something about the position of Armenia regarding this conflict, like before the 2020 war. Like, what was the main policy direction of Pashinyan government before 2020 war happened? Do you have any idea?
Well, I think it took them a while to understand what's going on. They have been very new to the process. They don't have any kind of security and foreign policy background, the entire team. So throughout those years leading up to the war, they were trying to understand the legacy they had received. They were trying to formulate a position, but unfortunately, Azerbaijan's decision to launch the war didn't allow any kind of constructive process to take place. And of course, I know that lots of people in Baku are blaming Pashinyan for his statements, and those statements were indeed very unfortunate statements. However, that these statements weren't part of a policy. I mean, I think he had an understanding that if there is an acceptable solution to the problem, he would go on and accept the problem. But unfortunately, the war happened and nullified the prospects for peace in our region for years to come.
Yeah, if I offer an explanation of Pashinyan's position, it would be veering into philosophy. So I'd rather not offer anything, because the only thing I can say is that it was one-dimensional, very uncomplicated understanding of the conflict, very naive in many ways, and his mental constitution and his mental architecture didn't allow him to understand the severity of the situation, and he's partly to blame for a lot of things.
If I also had a different perspective, not that I'm disagreeing, but I think the populism of the revolution or the 2018 changes was something that was dwindling in Armenia, and I think patriotism and sort of taking on a hardliner rhetoric. I think for Pashinyan was maybe another populist thing to do, especially in his relationships with the diaspora. And I think he misunderstood the support that he got in Armenia and across the world, thinking that if Armenia had the soft power, that he could somehow harshen his rhetoric against Azerbaijan and actually get some dividends out of that. I mean, he did get some dividends in some communities that had questioned his patriotism and whatnot. But I think his persona of just wanting to be the populist person all the time was unhelpful in this. And I don't think he was the reason why the war happened, but it certainly escalated and accelerated the situation. He does have a point, I think, when he defends that Azerbaijan was going to seek a military solution. I think there's some point to that. And we've seen there have been so many sort of pathways to solving the conflict throughout the years, but Azerbaijan, starting in 1997, chose sort of the more militant approach because it knew it had prospects for solving the conflict on its own terms in a military way. So, but I don't think we need to underestimate the damage that Pashinyan's populism did to this conflict.
I think it's important to talk about the mistakes that were made by the government before the war, but it's also important to distinguish between the root causes of the war and certain factors that legitimized Azerbaijani aggression. What Pashinyan did, he helped Azerbaijan to promote this narrative that we have a counterpart in Armenia who is not constructive, who is not willing to negotiate, who is making all these kind of populist statements. But it's absolutely clear that Azerbaijan was getting ready for that war for at least a decade and probably more. I think from the start of the Ilham Aliyev presidency, there probably was a political
decision. Since 1994.
Sorry?
Since 1994.
I don't know about 1994. I think there were some opportunities during the Haydar Aliyev presidency, and if you look at the dynamic from the late 90s, you could see that the overall atmosphere was better and the sides were more committed to finding a peaceful solution. But starting from the presidency of Ilham Aliyev, it was clear that Azerbaijan was getting ready for war. And as I've already said in my previous reply, what Pashinyan did, first of all, he didn't understand anything about the negotiation process. He was trying to figure out what's going on, to understand all the legacy, the negotiation legacy he received. And in that process as well, there were domestic political factors as well. Let's not underestimate the role of the opposition, which was blaming him from the very first day that he came, to sell everything. I think there is this very famous book by Mansfield and Snyder. They discuss the correlation between democratization and war, and some of the aspects of this theory could be applied to the situation in Armenia before the war. Like his speech in Stepanakert about Artsakh being Armenian period, it was a reaction to the criticism that he's not patriotic enough, that he's not populist, nationalist enough. So this was the domestic dimension playing a role in the conflict. But overall, it's absolutely clear that the causes of war have nothing to do with Pashinyan. Pashinyan legitimized or helped Azerbaijan to legitimize the attack. And of course, we need to understand that the war happened in a very, very difficult international situation as well. And Azerbaijan used that situation to minimize the possible damages or the possible international reaction. Any other comments or questions?
If I see we have some incredible listeners, are we allowed to invite them to offer some insights? I see that Olesia Vartanyan from Crisis Group is on, one of the most observant researchers of the conflict, to see what Crisis Group's assessment maybe is on the prospects for ending the starvation siege of Nagorno-Karabakh. Especially in light of the EU basically, normalizing or legitimizing Azerbaijan's narratives in the recent events. If she's able to provide some insights, I would love to hear from her. Also from Sianush in Stepanakert, if she would like to share some updates on her end, that would be incredible.
Anyone who wants to join can join.
My cat's ears pricked up on that. Another joke of mine that fell flat.
Everyone, can you hear me?
There's also a question written in the comments after Sianush gives an update.
Actually, I also have. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Thank you, guys, for insights. Actually, I also have question. My question is to maybe Tigran and Bahruz. I want to come back to yesterday negotiation process and these topics supplied from Agdam. I want to ask Bahruz if I know he, if I'm not mistaken, he lives not in Azerbaijan, but I'm sure he has relatives and friends there. If they really think that it's moral, it's normal, like first they starving us, and then offer some food in another way. Because for me it's insane. If we have earthquake, for example, and other disaster, and there is no way to receive, aid. Maybe they could do this step and then use as a propaganda. But in this case, when during these 7 months, like every day they starving us, and today, sorry for again sharing my personal emotions. This is usually I like every weekend I visit my nephew. He lost his father during 2020 war, and for him, I am like a hero, like someone who can find and do everything he wants. I spoiled him, and yesterday he called me and he asked me some candy, and he said that only I can find it. So, and this is first time, like I couldn't visit him, and we are going all this humiliation, and then they offered some I don't know, food. And I want to ask the same question, Tigran, because he like met and discussed with diplomats, and I don't know. I think I don't know how it's possible when these serious diplomats and decision makers like even discuss this kind of solution, if we can say. Uh, are they seriously think that it could somehow work? And how can like ordinary people living here in this condition, like take this food, for example, and to be sure that it's not poisoned or something else? I'm not saying like, oh, we are all sane and others they are cruel. No, they all know that there is no trust between us. So how come they come after all of this kind of solution? They can even discuss this way. Now, this is my question. And regarding updates, you already talk about it and we post it. I don't know how to explain like everyday situation, going worse. Yeah, you see, and every day when I visit some shops, and I posted today like women, they were like sitting, they are like sitting outside of shop because they said they don't have nothing to sell. And in every shop they have only bread and some dairy products. So, and this is only you should be very successful and to buy it. So it's really challenging every day. So, and regarding to last 2 days rally, even for me, I was not expected that so many people will join it, and especially when so many thousands people they marched to basement Russian peacekeepers. It was really hard, and I saw so many women, especially barefoot with pregnant women who I know. So, but and elderly women, and you could see like frustration, pain, and oh, I don't know how to explain this, but maybe it's also anger. And Tigran, you also mentioned like maybe it's strange that representative of governments participate in this rally. I think it's they want to be like close to people, because several days ago when one of this movement, and there are several days they have this march and action. So, and they want to like be with people because they don't want to uh, they don't want to be apart from ordinary people. And I think especially during March when they were with people, and I think it was actually good for them, for many of them who were with them. So if you have any question, of course I can answer, but I hope I will have answer for my question as well. Thank you.
Barus, shall you go first?
Yes, I can. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Ranur. Regarding my situation, I travel often to Azerbaijan, and last time I was there in, if I'm not mistaken, either in April or in May. The overall how so yeah about the overall vibe or how what people think there. From my impression is that uh, people in Azerbaijan, they are not aware of the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, or those who know, they are not informed well. Either it's not people just are not interested in this, or uh, of course there are still those who are very nationalistic and very antagonistic. But overall thing is that I don't think that this is like people's demand to starve people in Nagorno-Karabakh. I think it's the war in 2020. Yes, it was a demand of the people, but this current situation and post-war situation, people are not that enthusiastic about war and new war, or people are not that nationalist as before the war, because the war and the victory, it shows that actually the problems that we have in society, they are not changing, and at the same time, this overall political, let's say, stability at such a level that nothing happens. I think a lot of people are also tired of it. I don't think that there is like social demand to kill people in Nagorno-Karabakh, to starve people there. It's solely the state decision, and of course, I don't want to talk about the ethical side of it. Of course, it has nothing to do with ethical attitude. The idea is to isolate certain region for as much as it's needed to make them submit or to make them leave the region. And I think that exodus is one possible option, to be honest, for future. And we also see in the example of Söğütlü village in Azerbaijan, and actually many people in Azerbaijan who were not that much into Nagorno-Karabakh stuff, they also make these comparisons that when we compare what's happening in Söğütlü village, the village that is under blockage for environmental protests already, I believe, more than 10 days. And similar stuff happened in Baku's Nardaran village. There was religious protests in 2015. Also, there was a blockage. And this isolation blockage policy that the Azerbaijani state follows is not something new. And they do this, of course, unethical policy towards those who don't submit them. And of course, Nagorno-Karabakh is, I think, for the current regime is number one enemy, I would say, because the so-called like inner enemy, or let's say opposition, they are defunct now, and the first issues that they are concerned about is the future of this region and the future of Russian peacekeeping mission. Because when we observe Azerbaijani media after the Brussels meeting, we see that there is a let's say anti-Russian sentiments there, in terms of the statements that Russian Foreign Affairs Ministry made about future of Nagorno-Karabakh, and Azerbaijan openly demonstrates frustration. And I think it's not societal demand or people's demand or anything like that, but it's just solely the state policy to starve people there and to make them either leave or those who will leave there to submit.
Yeah, there is extensive academic literature on these policies. This is called authoritarian conflict management or illiberal peace building. I think Bahruz is also very much interested in that topic, so nothing new here. Regarding the reaction from the diplomats I get, well, most of them are really unaware what's going on in Nagorno-Karabakh, and that's our bad, because we cannot present the picture very well. I was meeting a very not famous, but an ambassador from a very influential country a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago, and she was honestly asking me what is the humanitarian situation on the ground. So all the journalists on the ground, and you, of course, Marud, as well, are doing a great job covering the developments on the ground, but also all the other journalists who work for the state media outlets, who are engaged in some sort of domestic political propaganda. They need to leave all those things behind and try to show the daily problems of people living there. They need to portray the humanitarian catastrophe that is unfolding in Nagorno-Karabakh. Regarding this Ardam option, well, that is what the negotiations are about. When they are talking about rights and securities and security for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, although they do not use those words, they mean that. They mean some sort of rights and security within the Azerbaijani territorial integrity without any kind of political status. So they certainly do not object any kind of solution. My problem is with the Armenian government. You cannot go to Brussels, negotiate for hours, and allow that such kind of formulations, such kind of wording is included in the Charles Michel statement. If you are not capable of preventing that, then you at least need to react to that, saying that you cannot put in the same sentence these supplies from Ardam, this narrative that has been instrumentalized by Azerbaijan to promote its integration agenda, with the issue of opening or unblocking of the Lachin corridor. This is just unacceptable, and this is, as I've already said, a failure of the Armenian diplomacy. When the Armenian government is not willing to represent the Armenian interests, I do not have many questions towards the international actors. And another interesting thing with the Pashinyan government's stance on the Lachin corridor is that for many months they have been saying that we have nothing to do with this situation. There is already a signed agreement, a signed statement, the November 9 statement, and Azerbaijan with Russia should just respect the obligations they assumed in 2020. Now we see that Pashinyan goes and negotiates. I think that's a positive development, that he negotiates and tries to find a solution. But in the end, he makes the situation worse, because Azerbaijan will definitely use this statement, and we will promote, and Baku will promote these kind of statements in other venues as well, just to nullify all the previous statements and resolutions that have been adopted by other international structures and organizations.
Yeah, and what Russia is saying that the agreement was in November 9, and after that many things has changed, and it's not working anymore. And it's like he tries to wash hands and go away, something like this.
By the way, we haven't had an opportunity to discuss a very interesting statement made by the Russian Foreign Ministry yesterday. Yes, the first paragraph of that statement is about that Russia is trying to put responsibility on the situation on the ground on the Armenian side, saying that by signing the Prague Declaration, you have basically changed the status quo and nullified the November 9 agreement. However, there are other interesting sections in that statement that deserve attention, and particularly the second part of the statement, where they say that they are ready to work with the international community on stabilizing the situation on the ground. This is a very new development, because if you read the Russian statements made a couple of weeks ago, for example, when the Americans were trying to organize this meeting in Bulgaria, they were very aggressive. They were blaming the Americans in stabilizing the situation. They were saying that Washington is blackmailing Stepanakert to participate in these negotiations. However, I believe some developments happened, and now we, like the main mediators, have some sort of basic understanding about the situation on the ground. And this is a very noticeable change in the rhetoric of the Russian foreign ministry. And there was also quite a strong call to Azerbaijan in the last part of the statement to open the corridor, and that is in contrast with the statement we see from Charles Michel, and that shouldn't be happening. I mean, if the European Union, the US, want to preserve its public standing in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, they should be more proactive, and they should be more constructive in their statements.
Yeah, the Zakharova statement is interesting also, that it comes in the wake of the U.S. ambassador to Armenia.
It wasn't the Zakharova statement. It was a statement by the foreign minister.
Yeah, foreign minister. It comes in the wake of Her Excellency, the American ambassador to Armenia, saying that something along the lines of the Minsk group parameter can be salvaged or saved, and so on and so forth. So there's some interesting things happening in that regard. It remains to be seen what exactly.
Yeah, certain things are definitely happening. They are not public, so I cannot talk a lot about them, but there is some positive change in this direction as well. I can see that we have Ambassador John Evans with us. Ambassador Evans, would you like to chime in and participate in our discussion?
Yeah, that would be great if the ambassador joins, especially maybe tell us if there's been any developments since the Congressional Lantos Commission hearing. I remember one of the things discussed at the time was Nagorno-Karabakh Human Rights Act, and of course congressional action is very slow and most bills never become law, but it would be interesting to see if the ambassador is willing to mention that as well.
Anita Khachaturova is also with us. She's a researcher from Brussels. Anita, please feel free to join us.
While we're waiting, if I may mention something slightly off topic, I think it's notable that Karni Kirkornian, a prominent lawyer in the United States, and his team have filed a lawsuit against the head of the Anglo-Asian mining, accusing him of aiding and abetting the effective false imprisonment and torture of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, or residents in Nagorno-Karabakh. That was filed earlier this week. We'll see where it goes, but it's interesting that this route is pursuit of trying to hold sort of enablers and allies of Aliyev accountable through the U.S. Court system. And I know none of us here are lawyers, but unless some of you are, and I don't know, but it would be interesting, to see that develop. Obviously, that would not change Azerbaijan's policies. It's itself violating the ICJ decision, but would be interesting to see if this approach works.
I'm not a lawyer, but I've been following the activity of the Anglo-Asian mining group. That's the name, if I'm not mistaken. For a couple of years now, they participated in purchasing mines in these territories even before the war. I think a couple of months before the 2020 war, they purchased the Zangelan mine and some other mines in the adjacent territories. So they have been part of this process for a long time now. And it's really interesting that there is such a case against this group, because I believe they do participate in all these crimes against the people of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Maybe next time we should have Karnik come and talk about this. Interesting, going through the courts. It's an interesting strategy.
Yeah, as we can see, nobody wants to chime in. So I would like to thank all our panelists, Simon Marakian, Artyom Tonayan, Barus Samadov, Marut Vanyan, Siranush, Sarkisian from Stepanakert. The episode is recorded. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel and posted on our website. Thanks a lot, and hopefully we will meet next week to discuss the major developments in the region, in Nagorno-Karabakh, in the Armenia-Azerbaijan context. Have a nice day in the US, because you still have a day to enjoy. And for us, we're probably getting ready for the Monday. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.